Okay, thank you for waiting. We are going to start the webinar. So welcome everyone. I'm very happy to be here today and to moderate this webinar. My name is Manon Questroy. I work for the Renewables Grid Initiative. For those who don't know us, we are an NGO based in Berlin. And this webinar, as you can see on the screen, focuses on France, and it actually belongs to a webinar series that we started last year, focusing on exploring various European countries' approaches to accelerate offshore wind developments alongside with nature protection. Last year, we already had 2 webinars focused on Denmark and the Netherlands. We actually developed fact sheets summarizing the discussion, and you can find all the information of those webinars, the recordings, and the fact sheets in our website. My colleagues will share the links in the chat in a few seconds. So as I said, today we focus on France and the latest updates on offshore wind developments and nature conservation. More specifically, we'll discuss last year's countrywide public consultation on maritime spatial planning that led to the allocation of areas for the development of offshore wind energy and the identification of marine protected areas. I'm not going to tell you too much because the speakers will explain it way better than I will, and they will present their results and their perspective. But before we start, I want to give you very quickly housekeeping rules. So please mute yourself when you enter the webinar. It would be great if you can rename yourself with your name and your organization so we know who you are. If you have any questions, you can write them in the chat. We will address them at the end if we have time. And of course, this webinar, as always, for RGI's webinar, is recorded and will appear on RGI's YouTube channel and our website. So do not hesitate to share this link with the link to the recording with your colleagues that were not able to be here today. As I said, we are the Renewables Grid Initiative, but I want to give you just a short introduction of who we are. And one of the significant projects that we have at RGI since a few years is related to offshore wind and grid developments hand in hand with nature protection at European seas. We created a few years back the Offshore Coalition for Energy and Nature, OCEaN as a shortcut, to exchange with various stakeholders on the challenges and opportunities on this topic. We have three categories of stakeholders in our coalition: grid operators, wind industry representative, and NGOs. We have 2 coalitions now, one in the North and Baltic Seas and one in the Mediterranean basins. On this map, you can see all the countries that we have in focus within these coalitions. And what we do exactly is we offer a platform of exchange, a forum of discussion for those stakeholders, and we collaborate all together to find solutions and advocate for offshore wind, grid development, and nature protection at sea. So those are the members, or the logo of the members of the OCEaN, North and Baltic Seas. As I said, we have NGOs, grid operators, and wind industry representative. And in the middle is RGI. We act as a convener, as a moderator, creator of the coalition. And we also have 2 supporting organizations, which are Ocean Institute and IUCN. Again, you can find all information of this coalition on our website that my colleagues have shared in the chat. And for the Mediterranean basin, we have a similar structure. This coalition is called MedOcean. We have 17 members that are stakeholders, including stakeholders from adjacent Atlantic waters, so Portugal. And we focus on France, Spain, Italy, and as I said, Portugal. Today, we actually have 2 of the MedOcean members that are with us, which are France Renouvelable and France Nature Environnement. And on that, those are our experts, our speakers for today. We have Dunia Kaluki, who works for the Directorate General of Maritime Affairs, Fisheries and Agriculture in France. Matteo Bernard, who works for France Renouvelable, that's the Wind Association in France. Manoa Herito, who works for France Nature Environnement, that's an NGO in France. And we will start, that was it for this short introduction, and we will start with Dunia, that will walk us through the process of the public consultation that I mentioned earlier on the French Maritime Spatial Planning and its results. So without further ado, I'm gonna stop sharing my screen, and Dunia, you can take the floor and share your screen.
Thank you, Manu. Can you hear me correctly?
Yes, perfectly.
And can you see my screen correctly?
We can. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. I'm really happy to be here, and I would like to thank the organizers for inviting me to this intervention. So I'm Dunia Kaluki. I work for the French Maritime Affairs, and today I will address the French marine spatial planning process, and I will mainly focus on the public and stakeholders consultation we had last year, the public debate, as we called it. So I know this is a particular interest, so I hope I can give you some headlights on what we did on this consultation. So to begin this presentation, maybe a quick overview of how the French MSP process works. So we have a two layers planning strategy in France. We have a national layer with the national strategy for the sea and the coast, which is the reference framework for all players and mainly for public policies concerning the sea, and it addresses so the sea and the coast. So this is really the roadmap for marine action. And this strategy is declined within the planning documents in every sea basins in France. So we have 4 sea basins at the metropolitan scale. So the North Sea, the Eastern Channel North Sea, the North Atlantic Western Channel, the South Atlantic, and the Mediterranean area. This strategy is also declines in the 4 overseas basins, but in the next steps of this presentation, the public debate only addresses the metropolitan area. Because in the overseas region, the timeline of adoption of MSP documents is very different, and the issues is very different, so it was not relevant to mutualize the débat public to the whole French seas. So the French public debate was an upstream public consultation. This is an obligation by the law. We have to consult the public when the documents are still open and not stabilized, and when we still can modify those documents. And the idea was really to deal with all maritime issues. So first of all, the debate was about the update of the 4 sea basin strategies on the metropolitan area. The sea basin strategies is the first part of the planning document. It is the strategic part, but there is also a second part, which is an operational part we're gonna update in the next few years coming. But this public debate only focuses on the strategic part of the marine planning document. And the main idea of this consultation was to fully integrate offshore wind development in the marine spatial planning process, which was not the case before. Before we developed offshore wind projects one by one, it was a case-by-case analysis, but there was no really offshore wind planning on the national area and especially on the metropolitan area. So the idea was to design a map for priority areas for development of offshore wind 10 years from now and to 2050, and also terrestrial areas for connecting to the grid. So I'll give you the main goals and some numbers to give you an idea of what happened during this debate. So it was a 5-month debate from November 2023 to April 2024. It was actually 4 public debates in the same timeline on all the 4 metropolitan sea basins. So we had almost 3,055 events and approximately 21,000 participants. So the project owner is the state and the 3 administrations concerned by MSP, which is the Sea Administration, the Energy Administration, and the Environmental Protection Administration, and also the TSO for grid connection. But in France, we have an independent organization, which is called the National Commission of Public Debate, and that commission was in charge to organize the consultation and was responsible to have people participating and to engage a large public and a large numbers of stakeholders. So the main goals of us, of the administration, was to ask the public and have the feedbacks on how can we reach the objective of 45 gigawatt of installed offshore wind. How can we reach 5% of strong protection areas by 2030? And how can we develop sustainable activities, and how can we give visibility to historical maritime actors, mainly regarding offshore wind development. So the small images you can see on the slide is the documents we wrote to give to the public consultation the main issues and the main goals of MSP. So we tried to make it the more accessible and to give all the information we have in one document per sea basins. It was not so short because every document was approximately 300 pages, but with a lot of annexes. And but it's the documents we produced to start the public consultation. Those 5 months debates were followed by a more deepened consultation with maritime stakeholders, mainly to keep designing the area favorable for offshore wind development. So how to ensure public and stakeholders' participation? Because it's a very nice idea to organize a big public debate everywhere in France, but how can we make people come and participate to this consultation? So again, it was the responsibility of the independent authority, which is the National Commission of Public Debate, and to do so, she designed different modalities for public participation. First of all, we had an online debate, which is very practical to engage a lot of people through all the countries and not only on coastlines. So we had a participatory platform that allowed the public to ask questions, and the administration answered to all those questions, and all the answers were published alongside the public debate to all the questions asked on this platform. The authority also designed a digital participatory tool intended to enroll a more general public and a not knowing public about public maritime affairs. And the idea was to let people express their opinion about do we need to prioritize offshore wind or environmental protection or fisheries. And it was a very simple tool, but the idea was to enroll a more general public. We also had sea trails. So between November and March, localized events were organized along the coastline in a form of a mobile debate and stops on every coastlines. And that includes, public meeting, public events, workshops, but also sea trips and also debate in other spots like cafes, like bars. And the idea was to diversify the type of events and not only to have the classic public meeting, but also to have other forms of events to, again, enroll the more large public we could. The sea in 3D, in a three dimension, was a complementary event intended to have a national vision, because, as I said before, the debate was on every sea basins. And this one event was in Paris, so far from the sea, but in Paris. And the idea was to have an event common to all sea basins, and maybe to deal with issues between sea basins and interfacing issues. So it was one day in March, so at the end of the public consultation. And finally, the last modality was with maps, and the idea was to make people work with maps. So we designed a tool with different layers of data. For instance, offshore wind proposition, marine protected area, maritime traffic roads. And the idea was to enable people to, play with those layers, to overlap those different layers, maybe to figure out that the marine space is very dense and the sea is not empty, and to see how complex it was, the planning and the developing of new activities. So all those modalities were used during the 5 months debate. And at the end of the debate, the national authority gave us a report of the teachings and the outcomes and the main ideas that came out from this public consultation. So with all those information, the government took an interministerial decision in October 2024. So interministerial also with the minister in charge of energy, in charge of the sea, and in charge of marine protection. And in this decision, you can find for offshore wind 2 mappings on each maritime areas. So a map of priority maritime areas for the next 10 years, and a map with a 2050 perspective. The second map is really designed to give the actors an idea of the next steps, but should be discussed again alongside the next maritime processes we're going to have in the following years. In this decision, you can also found the studies areas identified for the development of strong protection on the 4 sea basins, and also the follow-up to the whole maritime planning process. So for the next steps, we still have to adopt the maritime strategies, because the public debate was one step, but not the last one. We intend to adopt the marine strategies in October this year, 2025. And now we have to deal with downstream participation. So we still have to organize an electronic participation of the public. We have to consult maritime bodies and stakeholders, and we also have to consult our neighbors, foreign country neighbors, mainly regarding the ESPO Convention. So this downstream participation will occur in the spring, and all those phases should start, I think, at the end of April, beginning of May, and should last for 3 months. And then we still need some time to integrate all those feedbacks to adopt marine strategies in 2025. More specifically for the offshore wind development, so this is the map of every areas you can find in the ministerial decision. You see the areas in green are the 2050 areas. All the other one as the areas that should be developed within the 10 years coming. And for the next tenders, we intended to publish the specifications at the beginning of 2026. And you can see those areas with the yellow contouring on the map. I don't know if it's very clear for everybody, but you have one area in the north, one area in the west, northwest, one area in the South Atlantic, and one area in the Mediterranean that should be part of the next French tender for offshore wind development. That's it for me. I hope that was clear, and I stay available, of course, for questions. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Dunya. It was very, very impressive. And as we know, like those kind of debate can be very complex, but you made it. Your presentation was very clear. So thanks a lot for this. Um, as you said, I mean, this was a very effective public consultation. The numbers, 21,000 participants over 5 months. I mean, this is very impressive. And along, of course, the result maps. Yeah, this was very good.
Thank you.
And it will, we believe it will really prevent potential conflicts at a later stage because this debate ensured that the stakeholder engagement was done effectively. And two actors that actively participate in this consultation are here with us today. So France Renouvelable and France Nature Environnement, and I would like to hear their perspective. And first, then I would like to pass the floor to Matteo, that will give a short overview of the French context when it comes to offshore wind developments, specifically with the maps that we created throughout the public debate. So Matteo, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Manon. Hi, everybody. Can you see my screen?
Yes, it's completely white.
Yeah,
But
that's normal. And can you
okay.
see my mouse moving
Yes,
also?
I see it.
Okay, because I will use it to point some zones. So thanks again for inviting me to talk about offshore wind especially. So this is the updated map of offshore wind projects and the zones identified during at the end of the debate, as Dunya just explained. I will just start by giving you state of the art of the French offshore wind market. So, and maybe if, yeah, okay, perfect. Yep. So, with the first tenders, so since the first tenders that were launched in 2012, and that until the tenders that are still waiting to be awarded. So I just gave you in this table the main figures about offshore wind in France. So we have 1.5 gigawatt in operation, 1.5 gigawatt in construction, 2.4 gigawatt in development, and 5 more gigawatts that are to be awarded by 2026. So this leads to 10.4 gigawatt installed by 2032, 2033, that will depend. And in terms of floating, these are the figures. So we just awarded in France the three first French floating wind project in 2024, three projects of 250 megawatt, 250 megawatt, and we have 1.5 gigawatt that it's to be awarded this year by the end of 2025. So this will lead to 2.25 gigawatts installed in France of floating offshore wind by 2032, 2033. Dunya just mentioned it. Thanks to the public debate, we have been able to, as a state, as all the stakeholders implied in the public debate, to identify 4 zones. So those zones were Bretagne Nord-Ouest in Brittany here. We have Golfe de Gascogne Sud here. We have Fécamp Grand Large here, and then Golfe du Lion Centre. And if we sum up those 4 zones, that leads to between 8.4 and 9.2 gigawatt that will be launched in 2025. And this is the AO10, so the tender AO10, the first tender that will imply all the 4 basins in France. Why between 8.4 and 9.2? This is due to this zone in Brittany that still need to be clarified if it will be a zone of 1.2 or 2 gigawatt, because the public debate raised some questions, and some questions need to be clarified. So this is it. And among those gigawatts, there will be a majority of floating offshore wind. So this is the first time we will have a tender with a majority of floating offshore wind. That will lead and that will enable us to achieve our goal, which are 18 gigawatt in operation by 2035 and 45 gigawatt by 2050. So as you can see, between the 10.4 gigawatt installed by 2032 and our goals of 18 gigawatt in operation by 2035, we'll need to accelerate a lot, but it's good to have good objectives. And just to remind, so as Dunia explained it very perfectly, those zones of the AO10 are a result of the public debate of 5 months that ended in April 2024. So this is the state of the art. Those are a lot of figures and a lot of zones on a very small map, but the presentation will be shared after the webinar, so you will be able to have those figures and so on. So if we look at the, let's say, repetition between all 4 basins to reach our objective of 45 gigawatt by 2050, this is what it looks like if we look at the repartition between the 4 basins. So 15 gigawatts, let's say, in Normandy, 18.7 gigawatts at the large of Atlantic, North Atlantic, 6.6 gigawatts south of Atlantic, and 4.7 gigawatts in the Mediterranean Sea. Now let's talk a little bit about the use of non-price criteria in French offshore wind tenders, because this is a hot button issue, especially talking about, you might have heard about the Net Zero Industry Act that will enable countries with a specific non-price criteria to use in the tenders. Just to mention that in France, we've been using non-price criteria since our first tenders. So this is the things we used to. So here I put the repartition of the criteria for the last offshore wind tenders for the last specification that were published. This is the AO8. So as you might know also, in Europe, there are some European legislation about the use of non-price criteria, and the state aid guidelines mention that we cannot use more than 30% of the criteria of non-price criteria. So this is what we do in France, and we use the most of non-price criteria we can. So we have 70% of the rate, which is based on the tariff, and the rest are non-price criteria. If we focus on the environmental ones, you can see that there are 11 points out of 100 that are related to environmental issues and their consideration. The first one is based on 7 points, and this is based on the amount of money that the candidate commit to spend in the avoid, reduce, compensate measures, and in the environmental monitoring of the projects. Then the second sub-criteria is based on 4 points, and this is based on the recycling rate of turbines magnets that the candidate committed to. This is only for the non-price criteria that play a role in the grade of the candidates, but the candidates of the tenders also have other pre-qualification criteria that they need to respect to have the chance to be winner of the tender. So to mention some of them regarding environmental issues, we have, for example, the obligation to give an assessment of the installation's greenhouse gases emission. We have the same obligation for the operation and O&M phase. And finally, the candidates need to allocate at least 15 million euros to what we call Fonds Biodiversité, so biodiversity fund, that will then use this amount of money for different actions related to biodiversity preservation. Now let's talk a little bit about multi-use and coexistence in offshore wind farms. So some quick reminders. As we mentioned with the presentation of the public debates, it's very important to have a dialogue while elaborating maritime spatial planning. This is why we had 5 months public debate, but Dunia already explained that. It's very important within this elaboration of maritime spatial planning to integrate the most stakeholders you can. And this is what I try to do at the best it could. So our the organization that did the public debate. And then before and after being awarded, there is, of course, a permanent dialogue between the developers and the other stakeholders. So then it's more at the charge of the developers that won the tenders. For example, for the layout of the wind farm, for example, discuss with the fisheries to try to understand what would be the best layout, so maybe they can fish in the wind farm and so on. For the establishment of the rules of coexistence in construction and operation phases, to capitalize on good practices for next tenders and next wind farms. Of course, in France, we use a lot the good practices of the first projects that are in operation because there are not a lot. So we really capitalize on the good practices of the first wind farms. Then there is a general framework to maximize coactivity in the specification. For example, the producer in France need to carry out an assessment of the potential impact of the installation on existing activities in and around the perimeter of the wind farm. So during the construction, operation, but also dismantling phases. And in this, let's say, assessment, there is a specific section dedicated to fisheries, for instance. And then if we go like further, the specification and the general framework, it's a case-by-case approach by each developer with local stakeholders. So since the project is awarded until the project is dismantled. And just to summarize, at the end, it is a win-win situation because the better the best coexistence we have, the better acceptability of the project we have. And that's it for my presentation.
Thanks a lot, Matteo. I really liked the last sentence, the last statement that you did. Very good. So yeah, thanks a lot. And we see again that through an effective, that France has set very ambitious targets for offshore wind. You said it, 80 gigawatts by 2030. And the government has put a lot of efforts to meet these targets, not just through the public debate, the public consultation, and the designated offshore wind area, but also, and we'll come back to that with a recent reform that streamlines environmental authorizations to speed up the permitting process. As I said, we'll come back to that later in the panel. And yeah, you said it, a really well-managed stakeholder consultation is really key to this process. So we've heard about offshore wind, but what about nature protection? This public debate also led to the identification of areas specifically for conservation. So with that, I'd like to hand it over to Manua, who will share a bit more on this and share the maps actually that were produced through this debate. Manua, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Manon. Can you all see my screen?
Yes, it's not in full screen for now.
Should come. Yeah.
Now it is.
Okay, great. Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Manuel Rito. I work at France Nature Environnement, which is a French environmental NGO. So now I'm going to give you the perspective of a French NGO on the results of this public debate and on the interministerial decision. So as it was already presented by Dunia in October last year, after 5 months of public debate, the government unveiled maps highlighting priority areas for offshore wind development and also areas for strong marine protection. As France Nature Environnement was really involved in this debate, we really wanted to conduct a deeper analysis of the result of this debate, of this decision. So that's why, as everybody was working on maps, we also tried to work on maps. And our idea was to study potential overlaps, but also to study just the different areas designated. So priority areas for offshore wind power at horizon 2035 and 2050, as you can see on the map, but also how it can or not overlap with marine protected areas for example, Natura 2000 areas. And also, we wanted to have a layer showing the areas for offshore wind power submitted at the very beginning of the public debate to see actually whether or not this public debate had allowed to make an evolution of these areas for offshore wind power. So it's a little bit difficult to see on the map, but I'm going to explain it to you. So by doing this work, what were our main takeaways? It was that with this public debate, there was progress for offshore wind energy, and also challenges for biodiversity, being marine biodiversity. So when it comes for the improvements, and Matteo, you just said it, it was more planning, more visibility for the development of offshore wind energy. And so it's really useful for everybody, including developers, NGOs, TSOs, and the state, of course. And also, it was the first national public debate on marine spatial planning, and not everybody knows about marine spatial planning, and it makes sense. So it was really the occasion to talk about it and to raise awareness. When it comes to our maps, what we realized was that overall, but not on all the coastlines, so it doesn't work for the Mediterranean, but for the other coastlines, we could see that there were no overlaps between marine protected areas and priority areas for offshore wind power at horizon 2035, so 10 years. And also no overlaps between strongly protected areas or between strong protection areas, existing already or potential ones, and priority areas for offshore wind power. So that was a really good point as well. But of course, we also had concerns, especially for priority areas for offshore wind power at horizon 2050, where there were overlaps, where there are actually at the moment overlaps with marine protected areas, especially Natura 2000 areas. And also, this debate was really general. It was not only to address offshore wind power. And with this debate, there was no reinforcement of the notion of strongly protected areas. So we're very careful about this. So there are some weaknesses. And also what we observed was that the targeted areas for strong protection on each coastline are quite they're not enough, to make it short. So that was the big conclusions of the debate, and now we can maybe have a quick look at what it means for each coastline of France, and maybe it's going to be the occasion to come back on some of the points that Dunia and Matteo already made. But for example, for the English Channel and North Atlantic, what we observed was that the debate was really useful, but on this coastline, in the North Atlantic, it didn't allow to find priority areas for offshore wind. So we had to continue the debate. So we had to. It was too short in a way, and we didn't have enough information at the time of the debate to be able to identify these priority areas for this zone. And also, I'm gonna try to not make it too long. In South Atlantic, what's really interesting is that we also saw that there was an evolution and improvements between areas that were designated for offshore wind power before the public debate and after, and there were improvements regarding the fact that there will be overlaps with MPAs. So that was a good point. And for the Mediterranean, to finish with, it's a very challenging coastline for France because all the priority areas for offshore wind power identified are actually within MPAs, being for the next 10 years, being at horizon 2035 or 2050. Actually, for 2050, we even have a priority area for offshore wind power located within the marine natural park. So it's going to be very challenging. However, on a more positive side, on the Mediterranean coastline, this is where the goals for strong protections are the highest, which is 5%. For example, for the English Channel, the strong protection of this coastline is 1%. So yeah, there's more ambition regarding this point in the Mediterranean. So that's a quick overview of all the coastlines. So for us, what's next? As maybe you understood already, for French environmental NGOs at the moment, it's really important to reinforce the strong protection of the notion of strong protection in France in order to prohibit extractive and destructive activities in these areas. And offshore wind power is also part of these activities. And also one way to make things right is to locate wind farms outside MPAs, as it is the best way to apply the avoid, reduce, compensate principle. And maybe a last mention is that I've talked about priority areas at Horizon 2050. But I just wanted to clarify and say that there will be a new form of public participation for these areas. So it's going to keep it evolving. Yeah, that's it for me. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Manua. Very interesting. And I hear that generally you, at least FNE, is quite happy with the public debate and the results of the public debate. Of course, there are improvements, as you mentioned, but overall, we hear from you that it was very positive experience and results. So I want to say thank you to all the speakers for their insightful presentation. And yeah, we've heard very valuable perspective on the process of the public consultation and the results. But now I would like to take this conversation a step further and bring our speakers together for a small panel discussion. This is the opportunity to dip deeper into some of the aspects of the key elements that you mentioned already. Just a quick reminder for the audience, you're welcome to submit your question in the chat. We may not have time to address them, but we are collecting them and we will pass them on to our speakers later on. So yeah, I would like to kick off this panel discussion with my first question to Manua, because you just mentioned a few things. So as you said, FNE was very active during this debate, very present. So I would like to hear, in your perspective, what is the role of civil society organizations such as FNE to play into this kind of public debate and into this process?
Thank you, Manon, for this question. Well, maybe first of all, as Matteo said, the more stakeholders are involved in a decision, in a debate, the better the decision is going to be. So for civil society organizations, well, as we all depend on the ocean, we all rely on the ocean, and not only economic actors. So civil society organizations are not economic actors, of course, and that's why they also need to have a voice. For example, environmental NGOs, as just like France Nature Environnement, they give a voice to environmental issues. These issues being linked to climate issues or biodiversity issues, but they give a representation to these issues. So that's why they're really important.
And what challenges did you face specifically? I imagine that, of course, all of the stakeholders here may have faced challenge. Like, can you tell us a little bit about this, and maybe how did you overcome them?
Well, we faced many challenges. First, maybe the first one was the fact that this was the first time that the state was throwing such a debate. So it was a matter of organization for the state, for everybody. And FNE is actually a federation of associations. So for us, there was really a challenge of how are we going to mobilize our network or our network of associations. So we had to create working groups. We organized national meetings of our members to coordinate to see what issues were most important, and to coordinate our mobilization, basically. Another challenge was also the fact that all stakeholders have to be involved and they all have to have a voice to this debate, but sometimes voices can go against each other. So for example, sometimes the debate that was actually organized by the National Commission for Public Debate, which is an independent organization, which is really good because then it has neutrality. But even though we have this organization, sometimes the discussions were a bit tough, for example, with the fishing sector or with other organizations anti-renewables. So for us, that was a challenge because these other associations, anti-renewables, sometimes had like a fake news discourse, and it was dangerous for us because we didn't want this kind of discourse to discredit the work of environmental NGOs. Yes, and maybe one last challenge, because yes, it was very, very challenging, was the fact that sometimes we didn't have the information on time. And that's the case, for example, for the North Atlantic, where it was difficult to make progress for the location of the areas because we didn't have all the information necessary to have a decision. So the submission of information, sometimes it was a bit tough, but yeah, but it was very interesting.
Thanks a lot, Manoa. Matteo, so this one of the goals of this public debate is to speed up offshore wind and grid development. So I would like to hear your perspective and your analysis in this. Do you believe that this initiative will help to speed up offshore wind and grid development to meet the target that you mentioned, so 18 gigawatt by 2035? And if not, what is missing in your perspective?
Yeah, I think it will help for sure. Because that was the first time we had a debate of this size on the four basins, and that was not only because, as Manua and Dunia explained it, it was not only focused on offshore wind. That's for sure, it was very larger than offshore wind. But regarding offshore wind, an aim of the debate was to be able to have zones in order to launch tenders and to have zones that have been discussed with the most stakeholders as possible. Before that, it was a case by case and zone by zone approach, and sometimes before um, the debate was after the zone being defined, and the zone could move a little bit and change a little bit after it has been, let's say, defined at a big scale, and then it was precise. Now we start from scratch, I'd say. Everybody had the opportunity to give their view, give their opinion on which zone would be the best, what objectives of offshore wind would be the best also. And so we are now able to have zones that have been discussed at a national scale. And at least we have four zones that are, let's say, very precise for the next tender. And we have larger zones for the 2050 horizon that still need to be discussed and will be discussed in another cycle of the discussion. So to answer the question, yes, for sure that we have to reduce and accelerate the development of offshore wind to meet our target that, as I presented, are very ambitious, and that's a great point. Then I think there are some points that need to be done to accelerate even more, but this is more on the side of the review of the authorization from the that is let's say put by the developer, but at the state of defining the zone, this debate will really help. Yeah.
Thanks a lot, Matteo. I would like to hear from Dunya's perspective. So a little bit the same question, but more like if the state, like, do you have evidence that this public debate initiative with this very effective stakeholder engagement consultation has or will ultimately shorten the development of offshore wind projects? And are you gonna monitor this? And if so, how?
Yeah, thank you, Manon. As Matteo said just before, it was the first time we first mutualized to several offshore wind areas developments. At first, we had one public debate per one zone every time. So the law already give the possibility to have a debate on several areas for offshore wind development. But we took that one step further because we also mutualize this debate with the entire MSP process and not only one area by one area. So yes, we have many things in this debate, and as Manu has said, we have progress to do and we have discussion to take further. But it was like a very ambitious thing to debate everything with offshore wind development in one debate. So I think clearly it helps accelerate things because we mutualized a procedure that was before in several different timelines. And I think it's very important also to be careful when we request a stakeholders' opinion and when we engage stakeholders in the public. We cannot engage them like 2 or 3 times a year to 2 or 3 public debates on a very close object and very close subjects. It would have been very strange to have one debate on MSP, but not with offshore wind, and in the same year have one debate only on offshore wind. I think it would have been not clear, not efficient, and we could not have all the material and all the discussions that we have during this debate. So I think we gain on effectivity, on clarity. Even if it was many things to discuss, at least we were honest on the fact that everything was linked and everything was depending on all those subjects. So I think we gain on time and also on I hope on clarity and visibility for stakeholders and the public. And maybe how we're going to monitor this. I don't know for now, but I think in the development of offshore wind projects in the next steps, we're going to see also through the years how we can also still use from this upstream phase and how the public debate in a few years is going to be, feeling by all the actors.
And maybe Manon, if I may just to add something and to answer one of the question in the chat. Regarding as the question was, are those priority zones for offshore wind only based on the wind sector's criteria, or where the stakeholders involved also? Everybody had the opportunity to be involved, and as Dunya mentioned, one part of the public debate was to work on maps, so that all stakeholders, the civil society, economic actors, were able to draw their own priority areas, what they thought would be the best. So we at the wind sectors proposed some priority areas that we thought would be the best, and we also considered coexistence of other activities in our own scenarios, but everybody was involved. And for an example, as I showed some zones for the 2050 zone, for the 2050 period, if it was only the wind sector's criteria, we would have not the zones very far from the coast at the west of Brittany. So yeah, this is just an example of the result of the priority zone.
Thanks a lot, Matteo, for this complete answer. I actually would like to take a question from the chat because I think it was very interesting. So it's from Daniel Mitchell that works at BirdLife Europe, and it's a question to Matteo. So I'm going to read it out loud. Is the non-price criteria on ERC measures, so mitigation measures, just a financial commitment, or is it specified somewhere what type of measures the committed budget should be used for?
Yep. Yeah, that's a very, very good question, actually. At the time of the specification and tendering, there is no, let's say, very precision on the measures of avoid, reduce, compensate the candidate should use. It's the liberty of the candidate. Then it will precise all those measures if he's winner of the tender in its authorization. Because in the authorization, he needs to realize an environmental impact, and a very huge part of this environmental impact are all the measures that he plans to use and implement in the park. And then to get his authorization, he will receive recommendations of maybe additional measures of avoid, reduce, compensate, and operational recommendation to implement those. But at the time of the tendering, it's only a commitment. And this is something I wanted to add. And so thanks, Daniel, for the question. When I talked about the non-price criteria regarding environmental issues, actually the problem is that it's only commitments. So for the moment, the project developers, they just have to commit to a certain amount of money to get the points. So at the end, the criteria are not very differentiating. So this is an issue we are trying to tackle, but this is not easy because we need to find, let's say, quantitative criteria. And when we talk about environmental and avoid, reduce, compensation measures, it's not very easy. But that's a topic we try to tackle.
Thank you, Matteo. I would like to ask one more question to Dunya, not specifically on the public debate, but more generally. In your perspective, do the public authorities have sufficient staff to effectively implement the offshore wind targets in harmony with nature protection?
It's very nice, a very interesting question. I don't know if we have sufficient staff, but I think what we need is a good coordination between all the administration concerned by offshore wind development, because it's an energy target, but it also have to deal with environmental protection and fit in the sea and within the existing activities. So you have several administration, French administrations involved, the Sea Administration, the Energy Administration, the Environmental Protection Administration. And as you may know, we have some governmental instability for the past few months in France. And so what we need to have is a very good coordination between administrations to reach those goals, but to reach those goals regarding all the stakes that goes with it. So I do believe that the organization of this public debate help us building a common culture and to work on common grounds, to even if we came from different administrations with different public policy, we learn to work together, we see each other every day, and yes, we can still have more people working on the subject at the national level, but also at the local level. But I do believe that we are actually building a common team on the subject, and with all the issues represented. It's not only the energy ministry it's driving, but alongside Maritime Spatial Planning process and environmental protection objective also. So I think we make good progresses thanks to this procedure, and we actually learn to work together better.
Thanks a lot. That's great to hear. So we have 1 minute left. I have so many more questions, of course, but it's only a one hour webinar, unfortunately. And of course, there is also a lot of questions in the chat, but I want to reassure the audience we are collecting them and we will pass them on to our speakers. So I would just like to finish by another update that is coming for France. It's something to watch out for. So there is in France what is called the PPE, so the multi-annual energy program that is France's strategic roadmap for the energy transition. It outlines sector-specific targets for the energy mix and sets national priority for managing all energy resources, of course, with the ultimate goal to achieve the carbon neutrality by 2050. The public consultation for the third phase of this program, it's named PPE3, has opened this month, actually, and I think it's for until April, if I'm not mistaken. And the program will be adopted this year in 2025. So there is more to come from France. And of course, I would have liked to hear your perspective on this, but unfortunately, we don't have enough time left. So I would just like to thank you all, especially, of course, our speakers. It was very, very great to have you here to hear your perspective. And yeah, also thank you to the audience for coming. You can find the recording of this webinar on our website tomorrow. I'll share the link to the webpage with everyone tomorrow. And yeah, thanks a lot. See you soon and have a good afternoon.
Sure.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Manon.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Bye.